spent so many nights at this corner, you know, it's pretty rad. I feel like I played Churchill so many times in my life, long before I was 21, which is great. And it was really nice today to come into town and pull up here and just sit on this corner and just be like, yeah, all right, here I am back at the punk rock corner. Not 53rd and 3rd, 54th and 2nd, and 55th and 2nd. And I'm going to read a piece that mostly takes place in Churchill's that I have not actually read, but these are the liner notes for the reissue record that came out this year of a band called the Stun Guns. That was a pretty badass band from here for a while. Excuse me. And this is, unfortunately that record is not available here because it's just too underground, I guess. I don't know. The people who are putting it out probably have like 40 boxes of the records like holding up their bed at home in Chattanooga, but someday if you ever see this record, purchase it, it rules, and it's like a quintessential Miami punk rock record in its lyrical content and everything. And so this is about the Stun Guns, and it's about small town punk rock hopes and dreams. Imagine rooting for a team that never loses. In 1972, the Miami Dolphins did what no NFL football team had ever done before and has not been able to do since. They completed an entire season without losing a single game, finishing the season with a Super Bowl victory and going 17-0. For South Florida fans of the team, it was a dream come true, the ordinary yet seemingly impossible hopes shared by all fans, that their team might actually win every single game. In Miami, it's still known reverently as the perfect season. Now imagine rooting for a team that can never win. This was what it was like to watch the Stun Guns, week in and week out at Churchill's Hideaway in Miami. Despite the small size of the arena, the dwindling 3 a.m. Thursday night crowd and a dive bar on the main drag of Miami's Little Haiti, the Stun Guns were capable on any given night of coming off the bench and being the best band in America. Still, to this day, whenever I hear a band on stage taking more than 5 minutes to tune, I laugh to myself and think, God, this must be a Stun Guns cover. The Stun Guns were older than us. They had been in bands in the 80s. To this young punk rocker, they were obviously brilliant. Their first lead guitarist was Marky Awesome. He had a song called Rock Slinger. It was built on a smoking Johnny Thunders hot lick, and the lyrics proclaimed, I could rock before I could walk. During the week, Mark worked in a toy store. Singer Paul Enema riffed on Scarface in the Miami streets and came up with songs like Hitman, in which he tried on the line, I've got a briefcase full of blues. At the time, Paul was 24 and still living on his mom's couch in Coral Gables. By stepping onto the tiny stage at Churchill's, the Stun Guns turned their own failures into achievement and offered us hope. Offered hope to us, their fans. The Stun Guns were the Miami generation that was haunted by the elusive success of the Miami Dolphins' perfect season. After shows at Churchill's, I would often go with the Stun Guns and others to get even drunker at bass player George Kelly's seedy back house in El Portal. Inevitably, right before he would black out, George would put on a video that recapped the highlights of the Miami Dolphins' 1972 perfect season. Harry Callis, the booming voice of NFL films, would narrate again and again those exquisite lost moments of those long ago Miami Sundays, long before the promise of tropical paradise Miami 1972 had faded into the 1980s narrative of the Mariel boat lift and the gun battles between Colombian coke lords and old parking lots. An old Kodachrome 35mm Coach Shula stared from the sidelines like Mount Rushmore as brutal fixer Larry Zonka pounded the line and the cocaine-sniffing superstar Mercury Morris ran to daylight on the tiny TV screen. But everyone in the room had already passed out. Perhaps this explains what could only be described as the Stun Guns' quest for perfection in failure. Really, part of the Stun Guns' charm is their seeming unwillingness to even try. You'd see Paul Enema at the show, and you'd say, hey man, you playing tonight? And Paul would say, God, I sure hope not. Stun Guns bravely continue to outwit success with this very record that you're holding in your hands. In every instance where there are 2 recorded versions of the song, the Stun Guns have carefully chosen the inferior version for this reissue. For instance, the version of Revolution Sound, which is included here, is so obviously a throwaway track that no one even bothered to mix out the feedback on the second guitar track that squeals all over Paul's sweet guitar intro. By the time the bass lurches in, drunk and hopelessly out of tune, looking for a couch to pass out on, the engineer should have been waving his arms to stop them. Luckily, a version of this song that captures its pure transcendence was recorded live on WNYU and does still exist, if only because I stole the tape and carefully hid it from the Stun Guns for 14 years so that they would not destroy it. It was not easy to root for a band like this. Yet I always believed in the Stun Guns' ability to pull off the come-from-behind upset. By the middle of Revolution Sound on this record too, even this version recovers a certain bravado and marches down the field with dignity. The song was their one true classic, a song with the power to make time stand still. And by the swirling guitar comeback at the end, you almost think they're going to pull it off after all. The Stun Guns' fate in my mind seems inextricably linked to that of Dan Marino and the Miami Dolphins teams of their era. The Stun Guns reluctantly rocked during the long suffering years when the Dolphins were usually a mediocre 500 team, despite the fact that their quarterback Marino was at the time widely considered to be the best who had ever played the game. Marino was known for his fourth quarter comebacks that also inspired true belief. The team was woeful, but as long as Danny was in there, you knew they had a chance. He was never enough, but he was all they had. Marino's comebacks were always the same: inspired, urgent, doomed. 2 touchdowns behind with 5 minutes to play. It was always the Jets. Marino would flawlessly bring the team downfield for a quick score, and then the Finns would get the ball back with under 2 minutes remaining for a last chance. In the no-huddle offense, Marino would take charge, lifting the whole team on his back, magically finding receivers deep downfield as hope was running out, until there was no hope left. 3rd and long became 4th and long. Marino would find a man open in the corner of the end zone, some 12th rounder from nowhere state. But the winning touchdown would slip through this guy's hands as the clock expired, and Danny would turn to the TV cameras and make the Dan Marino face. A heartbreaking look of total frustration and incomprehension that seemed to say, I am the best quarterback ever, trapped on a field of idiots. It was kind of like this. As Danny got older, the look contained too a poignant self-awareness. I had seen the look much like this on the faces of the Stun Guns, as they stared in drunken wonder at their out-of-tune guitars on stage between songs. Yet I never knew if the Stun Guns' failures broke their own hearts as much as they broke mine. Indeed, Paul's lyrics were full of witty new ways to confidently express the words, I don't care. I need a blindfold, just give me a cigarette, and I'm a deadpans to an imaginary firing squad just before Buddha's blazing guitar solo. Perhaps revealingly, Paul addresses imaginary girlfriends in his songs as if they were the firing squad. Don't hang around if you can't take it, he warns in Hiroshima, and then shrugs, see you later, babe, as she walks out the door in Girls on Drugs. Paul delivered these lines like the hero in a Miami crime novel, singing them and playing them on stage with his rad, tough-looking swagger, one leg twisting and dancing against the guitar. He also, invariably, delivered these lines in a hail of garbage. The ritual of throwing trash at the Stun Guns while they played started early, around their 4th or 5th show, which is a Friday the 13th gig at Churchill's in September of '91. The Stun Guns played last that night after Chicken Head, Prom Sluts, and Human Oddities. By the end of their set, the stage was covered with toilet paper, crumpled up flyers, crushed cans of beers that we had snuck in, and half the bar stools in place. Audiences delighted in fucking with Paul Enema while he tried to sing, and it became a tradition to throw trash at him. In my mind's eye, I see the toilet paper falling like confetti around the mic, and I imagine the ticker tape parade the Miami Dolphins received after their perfect season. I think of the flying Schlitz cans and flyers, and I think instead of a loser's parade, a 3 a.m. ticker tape parade for all of us down Biscayne Boulevard, and I think of the Stun Guns. It didn't matter that Hiroshima's riff was stolen directly from Social Distortion, or that he stole the leg swing from Joe Strummer. Paul was our small town Joe Strummer. On those long nights at Churchill's, he was all we had. In that long ago summer of 1995, the Stun Guns went on an epic tour with the Schaefers from Dalton, Georgia. David Overstreet rode shotgun. David Woodley wrote the set lists and mixed hot toddies. Jay Brophy packed the bomb and thought about time and space at midfield. It was some kind of record. The stun guns controlled the ball for 6 weeks, but could not score. At home in Miami, I had imagined stun guns going from town to town, blowing away audiences, convincing the nation what I already knew, that they were the best band in America. Enema songs could lend contour, outline, even glamour, to the quotidian futility and woe faced by small-town punks that they would encounter. The reality of that tour was far different. This past summer, Schaefer's bassist Mike Pack and I stood in front of ABC No Rio, the venerable punk venue in New York, and we reflected on that tour. The Sun Guns and Schaefer's had been stuck in New York City for days with no shows then. The band had not been allowed to enter ABC No Rio, but they were allowed to sleep on ABC's roof. Mike pointed out a storefront across the street, a former bodega that was now a Lower East Side hipster clothing store. That was the first place I ever bought drinks with food stamps, he said. Joined by the Sponsacks, the three bands had survived by eating donated canned food that the New York City food knock moms had thrown out in the trash in front of ABC No Rio because the food was not vegan. I was reminded then of something else that Mike had once told me about another tour that we'd been on, or maybe a house we'd once lived in. Mike said, "The worst thing in the world always seems like the best thing in the world when you talk about it a year later." And so we are left with the legend of the Stun Guns. Some say they were digging the Stun Guns that summer of 2001 at a certain flight school in Opalaco. In Little Havana, they say they heard the FBI blasting Brand New Year loud with the windows down as they drove down Calle Ocho to pick up Little Elion. They say Buddha sold his soul for hot licks at the corner of Northeast 54th Street and 2nd Avenue in Little Haiti. They say Paul Enema gave Bob Dylan his first joint. And that it was Andrew Powell who taught Dan Marino to throw a perfect spiral on an exquisite fall Sunday afternoon. We are left with the legend, and of course, this record that you hold, another attempt at a fourth quarter comeback. The clock is ticking. Third and long becomes fourth and long. It's always the Jets. The lights weave in and out of focus, and the last call shudder, and the trash falls like confetti all around the microphone as the band takes the stage. This record may not be enough, but it's all we've got.